I think you guys can probably guess that I'm not going to be a full-time journalist anytime soon or just commit to YouTube as a business. I think it's the if you guys are watching what's happening with Sargon, what's happening with Tim Pool, what's happening with Alex Jones, you would know that it's very difficult right now, even if you're an established creator, to basically have financial stability because there's this effort to censor people that's totally based on propping up old constructs of the world of journalism. And the more you examine what's been going on, there's basically a bubble that's bursting in the world of online media as well as television and radio broadcasting, where there's just too much saturation of the same type of people who they are connected to the right people, but nobody cares what they say, what they have to say. And I think that in the next few years, you're going to see a number of these media companies simply fall apart because growth their growth models and their overall financial structure just isn't built for the way the public is moving in the next few years. I used to listen to. Okay, this has not. We'll get to the Bill Kristol analysis in a minute, but there used to be a show that has nothing to do with politics that I used to listen to called Rover's Morning Glory, and I thought it was the greatest show. It was so awesome. It was so funny that I used to drive to school in the morning, and my chemistry class was, I think it started at 8:30. And because the jokes were the gags were so long, and they even had this contest called the League of Extraordinary Morons, that I used to miss the first half of class because I would be at school in the parking lot on the radio just listening to these clowns. Well, after about 4 or 5 years where I would listen to that show religiously, by 2016, it seemed like the show was basically recycling the old jokes all over again, and there was really no desire on my part to continue listening to it. And I don't think I've listened to it in over 2 years. So people's tastes change. I used to watch MSNBC. I used to watch Fox News. I used to watch CNN. I don't anymore. And I think that we're seeing that they're failing to adapt to the needs of the public and really just be honest with them. That's the way that you keep an audience. I think that Larry King knew, at least he was giving his opinion, even if it was an opinion you disagreed with. That's why, where is he today? For some reason, he's on RT. Okay, take that for what it's worth. So there's these three stories that I think are very relevant to this overall topic of media implosion, is what I would call it. This one is why most right-wing intellectuals hate Trump. And it says, more than 2 years into President Trump's historic presidency, it behooves us to think more deeply about a persistent sticking point in the political life of the nation. Why do most right-wing intellectuals loathe him? This kind of nearly unified opposition cries out for explanation. So you scroll down, and this goes through a little analysis here. And it says, but where does this inner resentment come from? What about the education system? What about the education system causes this opposition to capitalism? Why do intellectuals feel entitled to rule, or to have the most prestige and power, or to be the most highly valued people in a society? Because in the information age, knowledge is in many respects the key that opens the doors to the halls of power and prestige in a way that it wasn't in ages past. Further, a capitalist society such as ours is peculiar in that it seems to announce that it is open and responsive only to talent, individual initiative, personal merit. Despite the created expectation, a capitalist society rewards people only insofar as they serve the market-expressed desires of others. It rewards it in accordance with economic contribution, not in accordance with personal value. So anti-capitalist intellectuals are resentful when they are not society's top dogs because school has taught them they are the most valuable people, the ones with the highest merit, and that society should reward people in accordance with their value and merit. But a capitalist society does not satisfy the principle of distribution to each according to his merit or value. Rather, it rewards those who best satisfy the perceived market express demands of others. So that's a very important distinction here. They're saying that this person who wrote this article, Dion Kathawa, is basically saying that the intellectual right, the people who publish in National Review, used to publish in Weekly Standard, not anymore, would publish in Red State, they see themselves as having the real brain cells and knowledge in order to bring forward the ideas of capitalism, but they don't actually adhere to the principles of capitalism because they don't realize that the market doesn't necessarily adjust to merit. Okay, it used to be, for example, back in, I mean, this is going to be, you guys are going to laugh at this analogy. Back in the late 80s, I believe, there was, they started selling Betamax, Betamax tapes. And Betamax was much better in terms of fidelity, video quality. I don't know if it's fidelity is the right word, but the video quality on a Betamax tape was better than VHS. But because people had already bought VHS tapes and players, they weren't rushing out to the stores to buy Betamax. So Betamax fell apart and nobody bought it. And it used to be kind of a joke when I was a little kid that if your parents had a Beta tape player, which I think my dad for several years he only had a Beta player, it was like, good luck for you. You're just gonna have to tape over TV shows or something. You can never find a rental video in Beta. You couldn't find anything in Beta. They didn't sell any tapes in Beta on. I mean, there wasn't the internet anymore. So if you went to the video store, you couldn't find a Beta tape. It was always VHS. It's pretty funny if you think about it. But that is really the analogy that I see here. So they say similarly, the anti-Trump right-wing intellectual bristles at a political system that does not appropriately value their expertise and superior knowledge, and which consequently elevates a quote buffoon like Trump to the presidency, and on the shoulders of millions of those quote deplorables, no less. Anti-Trump and right-wing intellectuals traffic in information, the gold standard in today's world, something upon which we are ever more reliant. Yet in this arena, the American electorate defied them and their harebrained proposals offered coercively, not through persuasion. Brazenly so. Thus they resent the man who smashed their pretensions of politics as white paper drafting session and roundly repudiated their perceived right to rule. No wonder they hate him. I think this is close to what I think. I don't know if I totally am congruent with what they're talking about, but the way I see it, you look at Bill Kristol, who's the headliner on this. This is a person who, for decades, has been trying to propose all of these ideas of American hegemony in the Middle East and things like that. And essentially, he's been trying to push that over the objections of the intellectual left in America for many years, and against the libertarian right. But for many years, the libertarian right was completely irrelevant in American politics, and the intellectual left is in many cases they're so easily corruptible that they don't even realize it. So you were able to get Democrats to vote for the Iraq War. You were able to get Democrats to buy into some of the more ridiculous forms of corporate welfare, things like that. So the Cash for Clunkers program, the auto bailout, those are all corporate welfare programs, and the Democrats and the Republicans have collaborated on that. And meanwhile, the real intellectual warriors on the right aren't willing to actually stand up and reject the leadership of people like Bill Kristol. So you have people at National Review like Jonah Goldberg, and I think John Podhoretz is another person and a lot of these people are, they're public intellectuals, and they constantly talk about how they have these like pure principles of conservatism, and they're standing up for conservatism, whereas Trump is corrupting it. Well, the fact of the matter is that they have failed over the years to actually stand for anything that they've been talking about, because they still work down the hall sometimes. I don't know if they work in the same building, but they work with people from the Weekly Standard and stuff like that. If you watch Steve Turley's channel on YouTube, I don't think Steve Turley is a libertarian economically. I am a lot more libertarian than somebody like him. But I'm fine with somebody believing in a little bit of rejection of corporate welfare. I think that there's that in many ways neoconservatism is much worse for a libertarian than populist nationalism. I don't think that either of them is the same thing, but we're seeing really a problem where these Cato Institute Republicans, a lot of the neoconservatives, they try to say, well, Donald Trump is actually, betraying conservatism. It's a bunch of nonsense. And then the reality is that whenever these people had the ear of the president, and in their case, President Bush, they played into the hands of big state, big spending people. They're no worse. I mean, they're no better than Paul Krugman, who is himself a self-avowed liberal and claims that the Republican Party is the root of all evil and everything. So I think that is the reason that the right-wing intellectuals are failing, and I think that this article echoes a lot of that. Now you go to the left side, and this is Jemele Hill, and they have a different issue.
It's a disgrace what's happening in our country. But other than that, I wish everybody a...
I think there's the wrong video, so bear with me. Here we go. So...
America right now, and are wondering how to navigate, how they personally feel about issues with... I definitely understand and sympathize with a lot of young people who are in corporate America right now and are wondering how to navigate, how they personally feel about issues with who they have to be at work. In a way, it's called Welcome to Adulthood.
So you've probably heard me talk about this journalist a few times. This is Jemele Hill, and actually, next to her is Michael Smith. She used to be the host of SportsCenter at 6, or I guess they called it SC6 at the time. I never watched the show because I don't have ESPN anyway. But she eventually talked herself out of her job because she couldn't shut the fuck up. And I get it that people have a right to have an opinion. I couldn't. What the fuck is going on here? I couldn't shut up totally myself if I had a job that had influence. But the fact is that at my job, I can't just walk around and tell people, stop promoting abortion. This woman can do that, and she's sitting. Look at the screen. Look at the backdrop of where she's talking. You have Ally Bank. This isn't a person who's standing up for real progressive values, or for that matter, real conservative values. She's standing up for corporate values. And I think that, I appreciate working for the corporation that I work for. I keep my personal views separate from theirs. I have no problem with their policies personally. I think that, the division I work for is pretty good. We help a lot of people. But I'm not going to pretend that I have the right to speak on behalf of my company. And when I go to work, I don't tell other people what to believe with regards to anything. Once in a while, I'll engage in some sort of vague conversation regarding, something that's tangentially political. But this is a woman who turned her entire job into a soapbox. You work for a sports network. You're supposed to discuss sports. So the graphics here show all of her tweets where she called Donald Trump a white supremacist. She called for the boycotting of all of these sponsors of the Dallas Cowboys because of Jerry Jones' anthem policy, and that included AT&T, Bank of America, Dr. Pepper Snapple Group, Ford Motors, Miller and Coors, and PepsiCo. So I want to say this, okay? Those companies possibly, here's a wild guess, there's a possibility that AT&T and Bank of America would want to advertise on, for instance, ESPN, which is what she works for. So how can you go and, there's a certain time and place for everything. And by doing this, I think she pretty much showed that she doesn't know exactly, she bit the hand that fed her, okay? And it's her right to object to the policy of the company she works for, but then they have the right to fire her. They don't have to. People are not tuning into ESPN in order to listen to Jemele Hill pontificate about racial politics all day. Okay, and advertisers are not advertising on ESPN in order to promote politics. It's a sports network.
When I was younger and in the workforce, there were times where I had to bite my tongue based off things that I was seeing or things that I just had a visceral reaction to. I think what you have to do is pick and choose your battles. You feel much better about the battle that you pick when you know how far and how much and what you're willing to sacrifice in order for your voice to be heard. I think you have to confront these issues.
So she wants companies to allow political conversations, but that's not the issue here. That could be a problem too. You know, if we're at work, and I've been in workplaces where I've had political discussions with people. It could go well and it could go badly. And I think since 2016, it's obvious that it doesn't go very well anymore. I used to, I think when I started the channel, I had a story that I used to tell where there was this Colombian guy I used to work with, an older gentleman, who we would discuss Obamacare. And he was a supporter of the model, and I was an opponent, and I'm still an opponent. But the good thing about talking to him was that finally, after years of people dodging the issue and whether it would work or not, there's at least somebody willing to defend it and talk rationally about it. I don't work at that company anymore, and he probably doesn't either. But we're really talking about a huge rarity today, which is having people who can discuss an issue as opposed to just attacking each other. And I don't think Jemele Hill has made that any better, because she called Donald Trump a white supremacist. She didn't say that we have to, even something like mildly inflammatory, like we have to discuss the white supremacy that's come about since he's become president. She went ahead and just called him a white supremacist, which is her right, but that's not a conversation. You're hurling an epithet.
Because I think corporations have to be sensitive to the fact that you are dealing with people who come from a wide section of backgrounds, ethnicities, obviously different genders, and that there are certain issues that are bubbling up and are exploding in our country right now. There's a lot of us that feel vulnerable, and if you can't kind of express that in the workplace.
So if workers can't express that in the workplace, that makes them feel vulnerable. No, that's pretty much, that's a subjective opinion. If Jemele Hill were to be in a workplace and there was a person who would walk around and hand out Bibles and talk about, the coming rapture and Armageddon, she would absolutely object, and rightly so. I don't think that the workplace is somewhere where you can focus on just proselytizing people to your cause. My brother used to work for a rent-a-car company, and there was a guy who did that. He'd go around and preach his I think it was some sort of evangelical person, and he tried to get people to come to his church and stuff like that. And they fired him straight up, and that was a union job. That was a union job. So imagine this. This is a woman who is, she's a leading quote unquote journalist at ESPN, and she's trying to say, well, we should be able to discuss our political views in the workplace. Well, I don't think you speak for the majority of Americans here. The majority of Americans want to go to work and be able to make a living for their family. Yes, is it acceptable to have some discourse at work? I don't think that's a problem. But if the discourse becomes uncomfortable, if you get people divided in the workplace on political lines, you're going to have a problem. And Jemele Hill doesn't understand that because, as polls have shown, okay, this is featured in Clay Travis's book, Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, and he's not a Republican. That's just the title of his book. He's a Democrat. I think he said that 96% of journalists at ESPN are publicly supported Hillary Clinton. Okay, and the people who supported Donald Trump never made their names public because they don't want to be fired. They don't want to be ostracized.
This environment, the reasons why your employees want to work there kind of get lost a little bit. If you can't live with yourself at the end of the day, then maybe that's the fight that you need to pick. Because regardless of what you do or how much money you make, if you can't really live with a decision that you made, or maybe with the silence that you have unfortunately expressed, it's going to be kind of hard for you to move forward. So just be careful in the battles that you pick, make sure they're worth it, and be able to accept the consequences that come with it.
Okay, I don't think that statement was so bad, and I go very hard on Jemele Hill, but again, she's making it on the backdrop of a corporate symbol, Ally Bank. Ally Bank is a massive bank out of Detroit, which used to be part of General Motors back in the day, a long time ago. They used to actually be called General Motors Association Capital or something. Or General Motors Allied Capital. I don't remember what it was, GMAC something. So I want to say that she went and said that she did not realize that her 2017 remarks calling President Donald Trump a white supremacist would spur such a contentious debate. She said, I thought I was saying water is wet. I didn't even think it was controversial. Hill told Dan Le Batard on his South Beach Sessions podcast on Wednesday. Dan Le Batard, by the way, is also on ESPN. He hosts that show, highly questionable. I've never liked that show. I know some people like Dan Le Batard, but I think his show is kind of retarded, to be honest with you. I was in the middle of a Twitter conversation. I was applying to somebody, she continued. If I was really trying to make a bold statement, I would have added the damn president. I didn't. I was just talking casually with somebody. During that fall 2017 conversation on Twitter, Hill wrote that Trump was a white supremacist who was largely surrounded himself with other white supremacists. The Atlantic writer and former co-host of ESPN Sports. So now she's at the Atlantic. So she's perfectly. That's the perfect place. You know what? Good for Jemele Hill that she landed in the right place. Because the Atlantic is, I'm not being facetious. The Atlantic's the perfect type of place for her to write. Later added that Trump was the most ignorant, offensive president of my lifetime, and his rise was a direct result of white supremacy. Hill's comments quickly went viral and prompted responses from Trump and White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Sanders called the journalist's remarks a fireable offense, while Trump claimed that comments like Hill's were hurting ESPN's ratings. And it's true. There's one thing, I hope people can understand this, that you can hate Donald Trump or you can like Donald Trump. But the one thing Donald Trump knows is how to affect television ratings. He's a classic provocateur. And he knows, this is a guy who used to call up Anderson Cooper from his plane and, talk smack about Rosie O'Donnell. There's an amazing video about that I think we don't have time to go into today. But yeah, that's basically something that she has to understand. And she should have taken note that while he was basically taking a dump all over her, ESPN's ratings were sinking under her. And since she was relieved of her duties on SportsCenter, the new pair of people on SportsCenter, I think it's Kevin Nagandi and Sage Steele, they are, reclaiming the ratings on ESPN. Meanwhile, Fox Sports 1 is still catching up with ESPN. So we're talking about a real problem for ESPN, caused in part by journalists like Jemele Hill. Although ESPN did not publicly punish Hill at the time, the company made it clear that her point of view did not represent that of the network. It wasn't even original, Hill said Wednesday of her original remarks. That's what it is. That's what is so crazy. I got famous for saying something that wasn't original. It wasn't new. It was not breaking news. I thought we all decided this after Charlottesville. That's a funny statement. I thought we all decided this after Charlottesville. Well, that is an indication that she's one of these people who believes in the fake consensus, which is something that I'm going to be writing about, in the coming 2 years, probably maybe even longer. That a lot of these people who work for corporate media, they assume that because there's something that's echoed in their hallways or that's pasted across their bulletin boards and appears on their websites, that the American public automatically agrees with them. And it just isn't true. It sounds like it should be true, and it makes a little logical sense if you think about it, because they think that they're the only media in America. But it's that type of thinking that made some, if you look at popular media and entertainment, that's kind of why a lot of these late night shows aren't working, because they all say the same thing. They all think that they're the consensus, but there's a large group of people out there that don't agree with the consensus, and they don't have a show for them. They might be tuning into some alternative media. They might be even be reading like some alternative books or literature. They might be watching Medicare for some reason, because it's a different type of humor. There's different types of tastes in any given society. If she can't understand that, then it's a hopeless case. But yeah, that's their mindset. Where were we? Although she did not expect the backlash she received, Hill said she was ready to face the potential consequences. I knew almost immediately that if I did face some kind of permanent discipline, if I did lose my job, if I was immediately suspended, I was okay with it, she said. Weeks after Trump's comments, Hill was suspended for 2 weeks for a second violation of our social media guidelines, according to ESPN. She had criticized Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones over Twitter after he threatened to bench players who kneeled during the national anthem to protest police brutality. In September 2018, Hill announced she was leaving ESPN after 12 years at the network. So they basically had to buy her out. And another story that comes, and so this is another person from kind of the left, Ellen Pao. Ellen Pao used to be the CEO of Reddit, and she also sued a major, I think it was a law firm, over their lack of diversity a few years back. I think she lost her lawsuit. But Ellen Pao is saying that everything is fake. She claims that internet traffic metrics are bullshit. She says this: "It's all true, everything is fake," tweeted former Reddit CEO Ellen Pao regarding a Wednesday New York Magazine article which reveals that internet traffic metrics from some of the largest tech companies are overstated or fabricated. In other words, they're bullshit. The metrics are fake. Take something as seemingly simple as how we measure our web traffic. Metrics should be the most real thing on the internet. They are accountable, trackable, and verifiable, and their existence undergirds the advertising business that drives our biggest social media, social and research and search platforms. Yet not even Facebook, the world's greatest data gathering organization, seems able to produce genuine figures. In October, small advertisers filed suit against the social media giant, accusing it of covering up for a year its significant overstatements of the time users spent watching videos on the platform. By 60 to 80%, Facebook says. By 150 to 900%, the plaintiffs say. So even Facebook is admitting it, that they're overstating it by 60 to 80%. And the plaintiffs are saying that it's by 150%, which is more than double, up to 900%. Okay, that's insane. According to an exhaustive list at Marketing Land, over the past 2 years, Facebook has admitted to misreporting the reach of posts on Facebook pages in 2 different ways. I can believe this. I don't get any coverage, by the way. That's why Facebook, I hardly ever invest anymore in posting my stuff there, unless I'm tagging people that I know who will share, and it's usually not the videos. I rarely, if ever, share my videos. I almost always share articles that I write with people that I know will share them, and I'm not depending on Facebook in order to help spread basically spread my material. Okay, so yeah, I think it's long overdue that we start to deal with Facebook's fake platform. And Ellen Powell said it's all true, everything is fake. Also, mobile user counts are fake. No one has figured out how to count logged out mobile users, as I learned at Reddit. Every time someone switches cell towers, it looks like another user and inflates company user metrics. That's a very interesting thing. And if an unlogged in user uses the site on multiple devices, each device counts as a unique user. The New York Magazine article by Max Reed goes much deeper, however, asserting the people are fake, the businesses are fake, the content is fake, our politics are fake, and finally, we ourselves are fake. Tell us how you really feel, Max. For starters, Reed notes that studies generally suggest that year after year, less than 60% of web traffic is human. Some years, a healthy majority of it is bot. In fact, half of all YouTube traffic in 2013 was bots, according to Time. So that's pretty scary. So I want you guys to think about that on the backdrop of these. We started out this video talking about the Bill Kristol crowd. They think that they're so fancy and whatever. Their audience is not nearly as large as they need it to be in order to affect America. And then you have Jemele Hill, who started out with a very large audience, thinking that they agree with her perspective on America, when in reality, as it turns out, there's plenty of people who don't, and they don't want to hear about her perspective when they're trying to watch sports. And then you have a third person saying, Ellen Powell saying, in reality, when you're looking at online media and its metrics, the whole thing is just impossible to really trust. So that's about it. I hope that I gave you some good food for thought about the state of our communications and media in the 21st century. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share the video. Also, please like my channel, subscribe to my channels on CocoScope and on BitChute, which are below. I don't think this video will make it to CocoScope because it's too long. And please like me on Minds, Gab, Twitter, and any of the other social media below. And have a good night.